Welcome into the Husker247 podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, here on Valentine's Day. Do either of you guys remember being particularly excited as a child about the Valentines that you had bought to pass out to your classmates? Like, was there, like, do you remember the type of Valentines you would have been buying in circa 1992? And I assume BC wasn't in high school by 1992.
Shut up. It's pretty close, though, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I said it, and I was like, well, that's probably puts him, like, right around 7th grade, so.
I was not worried about my Valentines that I handed out. There was probably a time or two, like, in 3rd or 4th grade where I analyzed, like, what a girl in class might have, if she put, like, a heart on it or something, where you're starting to think, like, maybe that girl likes me, and so you'd kind of study a little bit too much if something meant what you hoped it meant as a young boy at Sunny Slope Elementary School. So that's my Valentine's story.
Bruntz, you got a Valentine's story?
Michael Jordan Valentines all the way. That was what was being passed out.
I had some of those, yeah.
Yeah, it was whoever made them didn't want to pay the licensing gig to the NBA, so it was like Michael Jordan in like generic like Shopko looking basketball clothing. So that always kind of made me laugh a little bit because it's like, okay, we know this is Michael Jordan. We know who he plays for, but he's wearing like a champion athletic top. So
I immediately was wondering if he was like, wasn't sort of his vintage look basically a Hanes white tee and then super baggy black trousers?
Yeah.
Like 90s style, dress pants.
There's a fair amount of bandwidth on Twitter dedicated to Michael Jordan's very parachutey pants, like especially like post-retirement. The guy loves wearing like a 3-person tent around his legs.
It's like the 2001 NBA draft or whatever that one is, where the picture of the guys in the suits that are all 7 times too big.
Yep.
I feel like by the time I was starting to wear suits, it was like completely expected that it was going to be a much tighter fit. Like did either of you have a baggy suit? Were you part of that craze?
No,
not that baggy. I did have some embarrassingly baggy jeans though that I wore like in college and
like Jeanco. Did you have Jeanco?
Not. I didn't go to that level because I knew some people could pull that off. I knew that wasn't my my look, but yeah, I there's some pictures that I would like to delete from the record from like 1996 to 2004, probably.
How do you guys feel that the 90s Renaissance is coming? Like everything is about the 90s now. We're getting a full year of just Pam Anderson. The 90s show is a thing that exists. Like I just feel like we're in the cycle now where it's about 30 years old. And so everyone's sort of curious about it that didn't live through it. And all of this stuff is going to be rehashed. And they're making White Men Can't Jump. It's a remake of that movie. I don't know why you need to remake that movie, but that's happening. How do you feel about it? Your childhood is going to be on display.
I don't think that I don't think they're going to ever be the full appreciation for that. And I've thought this like now having kids of my own who just expect that you naturally can stream entertainment and you don't have to watch commercials and you don't even know what commercials are. And like terrestrial radio is not a thing. And it's like, I was trying to explain to my 4-year-old the other day that like when something was on when I was a kid and you didn't watch it, you missed it, like, or you had to tape it. Like, and then that was like a whole nother rabbit hole about what a tape was and what a VCR was. And it was bad, but no, it's fine. There's starting to get to be some late 80s music that's showing up on oldies stations, which is a little bit concerning to me. But
like what? Give me an example.
No, like a
St.
lot of
Elmo's Fire.
Yeah,
like St. Elmo's Fire is on a classics station now.
Like when I was growing up, like in Omaha, the 99.9 was always like
KGOR, yeah.
KGOR was the oldie station, and it was like songs from the 50s that made you feel good.
The songs that pick you up and make you feel good. That was the exact.
Those songs were like 40 years old at the time. And
Yeah.
if you think like 80s music is now like almost 40 years old, like that's where we're at. So I don't know. I just don't know, Mike.
You're talking about how kids nowadays would expect everything to be streamed. That's one of the beauties of sports still, is that it's the one thing where it happens at a certain time and there's sort of that community aspect to watching it, whereas everything else that's gone away. And that's something I think that's actually been kind of lost, like where it used to be like, oh, this is the finale of Seinfeld is on this Thursday night, the last episode. And it was like an event across the country, or Cheers or whatever that show was. And those days are over. Now like Ted Lasso's coming March 15th, season 3. People will watch it in their time and they'll, nobody's connected to it at this exact same moment.
The name of this podcast is going to be the Husker247 podcast. We're losing our connectivity.
Old guy takes.
Yeah.
I like it. You guys have more? Let's keep this going.
Oh, we could do like 3 hours of old guy takes, and it wouldn't play well for me to do that.
Okay. So I feel like you two are good people to ask of this. I was in a group text yesterday. The Counting Crows came up. What would you regard as their most popular song? It's Mr. Jones, right?
I think so.
I would say so.
But I feel like that's the song that's most synonymous with them. And I was getting pushback on this, and it was like baffling to me. I don't know what else would be considered like more of a Counting Crows song than that.
What's the most 90s song there is to you?
It could be Mr. Jones. I feel like it could be that or something off of Hootie's big album.
Probably something from Nirvana, I would say.
Oh, Smells Like Teen Spirit.
If you're going that direction, but
that's number one for sure. But like when I hear Hey Jealousy by the Gin Blossoms, I'm like back in my car in high school. Like every time.
Just listening to them yesterday. Follow You Down, all of that.
Yeah, it transports me back to 1997, and it feels good for like 4 minutes.
You pulled that CD out of the little black book underneath your driver's side.
I got rid of that. Okay. I got rid of my CD.
No.
Yeah, it's over.
Did you put the CDs for free on the Facebook Marketplace?
No, I probably should have. I think I just threw them out.
Wow. Someone who went dumpster diving had a hell of a weekend when they found that.
Yeah.
I found a trash can from 1994.
Squirrel Nut Zippers band. Yeah. You guys into the Zippers?
Crash Test Dummies? What is this crap?
None of it.
Try the Squirrel Nut Zippers out. Give them a listen. Not for everybody.
They were good for about 2 weeks in like 1994, 95.
I saw them in concert like a year and a half ago. I won't go on about it, but
all right. We're 8 minutes into the most off-season podcast we've had so far.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Dylan Raiola. How about that? We'll give the people what they want. I put in a crystal ball yesterday. I don't know if you guys are tempted to tail on that or not. Continue to feel that this is heading in a direction where Nebraska, I think, is a favorite. I don't think that it's an overwhelming favorite. I don't think that this is a slam dunk. I think my 4 of confidence probably should belie some of that to people. But I do think Nebraska is the team to beat right now for Dylan Raiola. And I have to admit, guys, I'm pretty surprised we're at this point. I mean, even when he opened things up from Ohio State, I've spent a lot of time wondering, like, what is the pull to Nebraska for him that has nothing to do with his uncle or his dad? And maybe that's hard to separate. But it certainly feels like Matt Rule and his staff have done a lot in terms of recruiting him and building relationships in a pretty quick fashion. Where are you guys at with Dylan Raiola? We'll start with BC, who's talked to the man.
Yeah, I agreed with your pick right now. And I think you framed it pretty well. It's not one of those deals where you should act like Nebraska's way out in front, or we're trying to get inside a teenager's head. That's always dangerous, especially when you're going up against USC and Georgia and some powerhouses. But I feel like Rhule's staff in a couple months has really communicated their vision well of what they're doing and what their plan is. And we've had the interviews on our site with Dominic Raiola about how these guys are on a mission, and basically he believes they're going to turn around. So Dominic Raiola and that the family is not accepting what was Nebraska of the last few years is going to be what is. He thinks it's going to be different. And I think people around here need to, it's a new staff, and you have to open your mind up to the idea that good things can happen. I think people are so used to like, no, that's not going to work. Something is wrong is going to happen. And maybe he will pick somewhere else. But right now, I think it's very fair to say Nebraska is right where you said they were in the crystal ball. I think you're on target.
Bruntz, you got anything you want to add to Dylan Raiola?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you go back to your first thing. Like, I don't know that you can separate out like the family aspect of it with him. Like, I think when you have your dad's name retired on the walls of the stadium, I mean, I think that school is always going to loom. I think that, certainly he's aware of Nebraska and Nebraska he's aware of what Nebraska was at its best and what it can be. I think, what's changed is you've seen, Matt Rhule and his staff, not only through what they say, but also what they do, showing that he's an absolute priority. I mean, Matt Rhule goes down there the first chance he has in January. You send the entire staff down there minus one person right before the dead period. And so I think that piece of it matters. I think also the way that, Matt Rhule and his staff recruit, I think it helps. I mean, I think a lot of coaches kind of lead with the holistic recruiting and, development of the person off the field. But I think there's something to it with Matt Rhule and his staff that they actually do that. And they've done that at other stops. And so it's, at least from the Nebraska perspective, a much different recruitment and kind of pursuit than it was 3 months ago. And I think that definitely matters. I think too, if you just look at what the depth charts are, what you would say probably his three leading schools are right now at Nebraska, Georgia, and USC. That road looks a hell of a lot clearer at Nebraska than it does at the other two stops right now. So I think Nebraska, in the past month or so has put itself in a great position. And I think your crystal ball, I don't think you were speaking out of school. I mean, I think Nebraska's right there for him.
One of the things that I have struggled with Dylan Raiola is putting into context, like, he is the number one player in the 2024 class. I mean, the single highest rated recruit that I think any of the three of us have covered is Wan'Dale Robinson at like 38, maybe, or Turner Corcoran in that territory. Tyjon Lindsey might have been a higher composite rated guy. But
it was Micah Parsons.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I'm talking about commitment.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons was the 5-star that I would say they had the single best chance with. Darnay Holmes was right there too. I mean, those two guys, I'm trying to think if there's really anybody else, but yeah, I mean, from a commitment standpoint, not only is this like the number one, it's so far and away different than what we're used to covering that one of the things about this, if Nebraska pulls this off, what he does in terms of being a Pied Piper, potentially helping bring, other offensive players. Will Turboff, who works with us at Husker247, posted in the Crystal Ball thing about a top 247 offensive lineman that basically said, like, yeah, I want to play with a good quarterback like that. I mean, I don't know that we've seen a lot of players that Nebraska's added that have that ability to bring, maybe one guy with them. But Raiola kind of has the ability to help you recruit multiple spots on your offense, and then certainly team wide. I mean, it's a very unique thing that we really haven't seen a lot of. I mean, even just if you limited it just to quarterbacks, I mean, a lot of the guys Nebraska's been around are sort of in that high 3-star, low 4-star range, and maybe the 8th, 9th, 10th to 16th best quarterback in a class. This is a number one guy, number one quarterback. Like, it is obviously a big deal, but it is so much even bigger than I sometimes feel like I make it on paper.
Yeah, it definitely has the opportunity to start within the recruiting landscape a movement to Nebraska in this cycle. I think, you see that a little bit to our neighbor at Colorado right now with the Deion Sanders waves of like, it feels like there's a lot of recruits who like sense there's something happening there. I got to take a big look at that. And I think there's some of that with Nebraska too, but Raiola takes that up like 3 notches because all these guys, they know who's at the top of these rankings. I mean, some are more into it than others, but everybody has a good sense of like, yeah, that's the dude. Yeah, there's something special that must be happening with this staff, or I at least got to listen to what they're saying because it was good enough for him. If this happens, of course, that's the caveat. But yeah, it'll be exciting to see if it does, what that does to the potential of the ranking of this class. It could be something we haven't seen in quite some time.
It's interesting too with him and getting into the peer recruiting aspect of what that could potentially be. I mean, he's lived and played in Texas. He's in Arizona now. He's gone to 2 very big high schools in Arizona where there's, a lot of talent there. He trains in Los Angeles. He spent time in I think in Georgia, I think when he was playing a lot of baseball before he kind of started focusing more on football. So, I mean, he's a name apart just from like the number one ranking thing. I mean, I think he's kind of known in those areas as, a kind of a personality that kids kind of gravitate towards. And, certainly when you're the number one quarterback in the country, that carries with it some cash too. So, and I don't know. I mean, Dominic Raiola too. He's a high school coach. I mean, he's kind of keeps his eye on things in Southern California and in Texas, and that's another kind of piece to it too. But yeah, I mean, everybody makes jokes about the Calabrasca stuff and Buki and those kinds of things. But I mean, when you have if you potentially have the number one player in the country, I mean, that's a game changer in terms of, just instant credibility with top recruits.
Was Brendan Radley Hiles? He wasn't a 5-star when he committed, though, right?
No, I actually just looked too. Another guy that, I mean, he didn't commit, but he visited and was tied to Talanoa Hufanga.
Oh yeah,
but he was. I mean, he was even kind of more isolated up in Oregon. I don't know that he really had the chops that somebody like Raiola would.
Yeah, that was a USC, Oregon, and kind of Nebraska situation there for a while. Now he's a pretty good defensive back for the 49ers. All right, anything you guys want to add recruiting-wise, football-wise, before we take a quick time out here? Did you think it was a penalty on the defensive back from the Eagles?
Yes, I didn't want it called there, but I mean, he held him, so it was a late flag. Good to see the Chiefs get the benefit of a call once in a while.
Yeah, they never do. It's just tough for them.
Guy's got his Denver Broncos beanie on, and he's not happy. I thought it was I wish he wouldn't have called it. It was one of those gray area calls where I think there's calls that fall into that realm where it's like you could call it, or you everybody acts like it has to be one or the other. Right. It's one of those calls where you could flip a coin on it.
Two things can be true. I as a football fan could have been rooting for Philadelphia to have a chance to tie that game with a final drive. and that also could have been I mean, yeah, in the first quarter, that's a no doubter. It's that's just a tough one. I'm surprised that the NFL didn't have some kind of thing in place to make sure that there was going to be at least a final drive. It's very un-NFL like to have that. That's
The
easy kick.
big weekend for referring to it as the script. So
Yeah.
Do you guys know what an octopus is as it relates to football gambling?
No.
An octopus is when you score the touchdown and then you also score the 2-point conversion. Same player. So Jalen Hurts had an octopus in the Super Bowl. Just learned about it this weekend, and apparently this is going to be a thing now. So you're welcome.
Learned something new today.
So there you go. BC, did you make any exciting new appetizers for the Super Bowl? You were asking folks.
No, I didn't. So everybody who put in their recipe on our website did it all for naught. But
are you going to make a cookbook that you'll distribute to our subscribers?
We could do that. Yeah, I do that for
cookbook.
I do that for the sake of everybody, though. I feel like it's always nice if you have I like when people give a cheat sheet on a really simple recipe on a day like that, and people can take or leave. But I didn't make anything too great. Had my folks over. As you guys know, we were painting our basement because we had a little catastrophe downstairs. So my dad and I were all covered in paint. I still have it in my hair and all that. But
purple and yellow, right, for the Vikings?
C Frost. S Frost, because S Frost always S Frost always works in Nebraska.
Yeah, it's quite the gamble you're making on that basement.
Yeah,
it's the onside kick of paints.
Nice. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to get into a little basketball, another big home win. Can they get a big road win? Rutgers on Tuesday night. And then Michael Bruntz will fill us in on what to know as Nebraska has their first series of the year for baseball. All that and more when we return. All right, BC. Keisei Tominaga, is this a thing? Can we expect 20 points a night now from Keisei?
Could be tough against Rutgers. I mean, they have a way of making guys struggle for it. So if he puts up 20 tonight, he'll have earned it. But it's been fun. I wrote about him last night on the site. Like, even in the arena, every time he touches the ball in the arena now, there's a little bit of buzz to it. Like, it was funny to me I think it was an overtime with 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes left. It was a time where you want to milk the clock. And Keisei from about 30 feet wound up, gave the old fake, like he might pull the trigger. And you're kind of like, I don't know. Maybe he's going to do it. Like that's kind of his game. But he's done that a few times. And I just enjoy the psych move that he has. You want to talk about 90s terminology, psych or not, where he's like, not, and pulls it back. So I've really had fun watching him the last week. And it's been a very good week for Fred Hoiberg. I mean, I don't know what the big picture conversation exactly where it was 2 weeks ago, or if it's changed or not changed at all. But I think the public perception is different when you have 2 back-to-back satisfying games at PBA with a good crowd on hand, where if you had crapped the bed and you had lost one or both those games by 15 points and people are walking out it's a fire drill with 6 minutes left heading to the exits, you guys, I mean, it would be a different conversation around here right now about how things have gone. So it was a very useful week as far as that conversation goes for the program. Now, you could argue if it really means that much or not in the big picture, and that's fair. But I do think the current perception is higher than it's been in a while because of that comeback.
Yeah, I wrote about it. That crowd on Saturday was really, really good. I mean, it was a nice day out. It's an 11-win team. And obviously, I think having Wisconsin and Chucky Hepburn in the building probably helped ignite a little more intrigue. But that crowd was ready to go. And there was a group of high school kids in front of me, and they were all fired up. And that made it more fun for the section I was sitting in. And it was great to see. Like, I don't want to belabor this because I don't want it to just, come off as hollow or anything, but the support Nebraska athletics gets relative to the results people have seen over these last few years is just incredible. And it's one of those things that if they just put it together, they have everything sort of is here. They just need the wins. Like I can't get over that sometimes. Like you watch other games. I mean, I think when Nebraska was playing at Michigan on Tuesday night at like 5:30, so 6:30 Eastern time, it's a pretty empty arena. And we're talking about Michigan. Like that's a place that, you should expect. They've had multiple championship game appearances in the last decade. And understandably, Nebraska isn't going to bring a ton of people out, I suppose. But the support here is just remarkable. And I just want to mention that. Bruntz, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean it's a good win. What are they 9-3 at home now with a loss to basically what should have been a win against Purdue and losses to Illinois and Northwestern.
Northwestern
Is that the other one?
Yep, Northwestern. Who's good, by the way? I mean, Northwestern's solid.
They just beat Purdue.
They just beat Purdue. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it looks like the rest of the way, but I mean, the schedule shapes up okay. They've got a stretch of road game or a stretch of home games coming up here where you can do something. And I don't know that I think it's going to be tough to get out of that first day of the Big Ten tournament, but they're still fighting. I think they're the way that this team plays, I think, is in part why you're still seeing the support that you are for the team. I mean, I think that's a big piece of it. And I do think, you're talking kind of big picture, Brian. I think this probably, gives Fred next year. I mean, I think that's kind of where we're at right now. Because you beat Creighton, you beat Iowa, you beat Wisconsin. I mean, that's those are feathers that Nebraska basketball has not had in its cap for a few years now. So I think unless things just completely fall out the bottom, I think they've got a chance to maybe finish the regular season with a little momentum, a little feel-good story.
Yeah, I mean, whatever people think about the last week and if it affected anything or not, Trev has had public comments which suggest that he has seen progress. And then, Ted Carter's tweeting after the game how this is one of the best wins and stuff. So it just sort of feels like the people who matter are aiming toward the direction of running it back. And I think probably under the opinion that Fred Hoiberg changed his direction and recalculated this last offseason. And yes, you wish you had a couple of those years back, and maybe it would have happened a year or two previous to this where you did that change of course. But better late than never, and now let's see where it goes. But they are going to have to do some serious recruiting and land a dude or two in this offseason because it's another you think about Grissel and Walker. I mean, Walker is just a guy. I know he had a turnover-prone game the other day, but can't take for granted just like how difficult that matchup is for the opposition and how he facilitates Nebraska's offense. So that he's going to be a tough guy to replace.
What's Nebraska's best win this year, would you guys say? Brian?
I would say, the Creighton game. I know CU was scuffling at that point, but where you see where they're at now, I think that's the one that stands out to me. Do you have another one in mind? Or, I thought Saturday's win over Wisconsin was the most fun and like the most captivating for various reasons because of Tominaga and also just, it was the biggest comeback in PBA history. So it's something you just don't see a lot. And the way they erased that lead in 5 minutes was incredible. It was just like a boring kind of, it felt like, oh, this is going to be a sad story type of game where it's over with 8 minutes left. And then a few minutes later, you're like, right, Nebraska's going to win this thing maybe.
Yeah. Now to me, it's still Creighton. I mean, they kind of caught Creighton at the right time. I mean, if we're being honest, but yes. I think, Creighton's going to where they're headed. I mean, I still think that was a good team and will be thought of as a decent team. The thing that, it gives me a little pause. I mean, Wisconsin's probably not a tournament team. They're kind of getting the job done against teams that you have to get the job done against if you're going to get into that kind of mid pack of the Big Ten standings right now. And that's a step. I mean, if we're being honest, I mean, this is a basketball program that's struggled to win by games the last few years. So, I take that as progress. But to me, that Creighton game is still the bigger win. I mean, I know what Ted Carter said. And yeah, conference wins matter, but there's just to me a little bit more like 5 years from now, you're probably still going to be referring back to that game, that win over Creighton versus whatever you did against Wisconsin this past weekend. And that's just the way it is.
We'll be talking about the Final Four trip in 24, 25, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So there's that. They're 12-14. We'll finish it up with this on basketball. So they have 5 games left in the regular season. Now, if you're really a kind of a dreamer, an optimist, they would have to win 4 of the 5, to get where you're on the plus side with the win-loss column, and that would open up other opportunities. So that's going to be difficult. So honestly, if we're going to really entertain that conversation, a big part of it comes to Tuesday night. And if they surprise people and won at Rutgers, which is a very difficult place nowadays to win a basketball game, and they're a rugged team, and I don't like the matchup, I'll be honest, but if they're going to change the conversation a major way about like, oh, there's even more to this season, it's actually tonight's a big tilter, and if that's possible.
You're going to need Tominaga to be like super Tominaga tonight, I feel like.
Super Tominaga.
You're going to need to make some shots. You're going to have to make a run or two because, like Rutgers is just a program that now – they just they get you down in the mud and they just wrestle you for 40 minutes. I mean, that's how it is. So that's going to be, I agree. That's a tough matchup. And especially if Nebraska can't avoid foul trouble, they're in for a long night, I think.
All right. Something else is happening. It's the start of baseball season, and set it up for us, Bruntz. I mean, last year, of course, there was all the optimism of trying to build off a really exciting run, a couple years ago, where I think it kind of got the casual fan really like watching Husker baseball again. And then so last year was a clunker, and so they gotta rebuild it up a little bit. But what do you think about their opportunity to do so with what you know about this roster right now?
It's interesting, like. The year they won the Big Ten title, Nebraska wasn't really even in the preseason conversation. Last year, they were picked by coaches to win the league. They missed the Big Ten tournament. This year, I think there's probably going to be a little bit fewer expectations in terms of, what this team can be at the conference level. I mean, I would say they're probably 4th in the league right now, just based on kind of what projections have been. And the one thing that I think I can say for this team is they've kind of taken the lessons of last year in the way that they put things together. And, they've gotten older on the mound. They've gotten older at the plate. They've got more depth in the pitching staff. They've got more depth, in terms of options at the plate. So, we'll see. I mean, you need some guys to kind of rise up and have good seasons behind Max Anderson and Griffin Everett and Bryce Matthews. And, on the mound, I think they're a little bit better set up. They've got veteran guys in the bullpen, which always helps you. They really like what Emmett Olson can be as a Friday night starter. And they added Jace Kaminska, the transfer from Wichita State, that they feel like can be a Saturday guy. And he's worked hard to develop a third pitch. So it seems like the pieces are more in place. And, I think the expectations being toned down a little bit will probably be a good thing for this team. It's just when you're around them, it feels like a much different group. And I think that's a good thing because at times last year it was, I don't think the coaches would probably say that it was a great group to be around.
For those listening who haven't taken a close look at the schedule, can you kind of set up the early non-con and sort of Nebraska in past years, they obviously you go to warm weather sites a lot of times, and you take on some really good competition right off the bat, and that can be tough, especially when you're coming from this neck of the woods. But what are the opportunities in place the next couple of weeks? Kind of set it up what they're facing.
Yeah, so they'll have 3 weekends of non-con play before they get to Haymarket Park in March, and they start with 4 games at San Diego, University of San Diego this weekend. They're picked to win the West Coast Conference, so definitely a team that's going to be a test right out of the gates. Also, Mark McGuire's son, I believe, is on the roster there in San Diego, so make note of that in your scorecards now. After that, they go to South Alabama for 3 games, get a visit lovely Mobile this time of year. And then it's not the DQ Classic like it was in olden days, but the Cambria Classic up at the Bird Death Dome in Minneapolis.
Hey.
They get it's basically it's a tough one. They've got Vanderbilt, they've got Ole Miss, and I believe Hawaii is the 3rd team they've got that weekend. I'm not sure why they felt like Hawaii needed to come to Minnesota in early March to play baseball, but I believe that's the 3rd team that Nebraska gets that weekend. So, you're going to be tested the first 2 weekends, and then, oh, by the way, you're playing 2 of the best teams in the SEC right before you come home for essentially a month of games in the state of Nebraska. So that's the challenge ahead. Will Bolt is always going to schedule tough early in the season, because if you win those games, you set yourself up really well later in the year for regional conversations, potential hosting, that kind of thing. So it's that's the schedule. Now the challenge is taking care of your own business.
Bruntz, in your years of doing this, is it harder for a team to get the bats going or to have the pitching ready to go against live hitting in these first couple weeks? Or does it really just depend on the type of team that you have?
It depends on the type of team. I think pitching is always a little bit tougher because, especially the first few weeks, there's like occasionally you're playing, 4 games in a weekend, and it doesn't seem like a big deal. But when you're having to hold out somebody for that 4th game to start, it's typically somebody that would probably pitch in a high pressure situation in those first 3 games. It makes it tougher. And you're still trying to figure out roles and where guys are comfortable, because it's one thing to do it in a scrimmage. It's another thing to get out there and do it when it actually matters. I remember Darren Erstad always tells a story about, Chad Linsman was throwing like 7 or 8 miles an hour slower than what he had been in the opening weekend. And they thought he'd hurt his arm, but it turns out he was just so nervous that the velocity wasn't there. So that's something you have to kind of deal with that first weekend, is just, guys being comfortable and figuring out, who handles what situation, how many times a guy can pitch in a weekend. I mean, there's some guys that can throw Friday and then come back in a relief role, on Saturday or Sunday or Monday in a 4-week series, but 4-game series. But you just never know until you actually have to do it.
No doubt about it. Anything else that you guys want to hit on before we shut this thing down?
Do you guys have a favorite Drury Day sport? It's kind of a dreary day here in Lincoln. Do you have it was making me think of bad weather sporting events or drizzly days or rain or snow. Do you have a favorite game you've been at?
You'll appreciate this because it ties together things that you've experienced. You were probably at the game. The 2009 Missouri game, that Thursday night, played in awful weather. Nebraska was terrible for 3 quarters. I'm working for the Daily Nebraskan, and obviously there's deadline. It's a Thursday night game. And so I have my column largely written up about how, once again, Bo Pelini has the opportunity to take a step forward with the program, can't do it. And then that whole 4th quarter happens, and it's just one of those Control A, delete, you're starting from scratch, and you have about 25 minutes to get this thing hammered out. I have no idea what I wrote. I don't think it's particularly good. I should search the search the Daily Nebraskan Annals to figure out what that was. But that was one of those rare games where, you work ahead and it completely blows up in your face.
Well, the game got delayed by like an hour and a half, I think, because of the weather. It started.
I don't even
later.
remember that.
Yeah, there was a delay. And then, of course, at Missouri, you had the post game was under the stands. So you have a bunch of Missouri jackwagons like yelling and stuff in the background.
Yeah, they were pretty quiet, though, relative to what they would have been.
That night they were. But the band, they have their band come through. One of those classic cases. Yeah, that's a good one.
92 Nebraska, Colorado.
Yeah.
That would be on our bingo board if we did passed out bingo boards to our longtime listeners. They can go ahead and just mark it off once they get a blackout.
Yeah.
We send them the quarter zip that they were supposed to receive in 2013.
That was a cold game. It was rainy too.
Yeah. Wasn't a good game for Cordell and Coy Detmer. 91 Nebraska, Oklahoma comes to my mind. It was played on basically like an ice rink type field. Calvin Jones, Nebraska scored like the last 19 points. One of the best defense chants, which isn't used enough anymore, where the whole stadium full throat was like, defense. Like you don't get those anymore. That game had it.
All you get now is the stand up and shout.
See, I'm bringing it back to the beginning where I'm saying how.
I was just going to say, Bruntz is going to be explaining to his kid about how defense used to be a chant.
Yeah.
And now everyone just screams loud noises.
People used to come to games with a big D and a big picket fence. That's how we cheered for defense back then. None of that Sammy Hagar crap.
Yeah.
Oh man.
You know what else is a great stadium? What used to be a staple that's gone is they did it against Miami in 2014 at the end. They did the na goodbye where you say goodbye, sing goodbye, you serenade them. When the whole crowd does that song, that's a middle finger. That's like it is that should come back, because that's like nothing can make you feel worse, I think, if you're on the field than a whole stadium like see ya. And that it's too bad that's gone away.
Based on how that night went, there were probably more than a few middle fingers.
Yeah, there definitely was one. Eric Flowers from Miami gave the crowd one, I remember.
Yeah.
Bruntz, what's the longest rain delay that you sat through for Nebraska baseball?
There's been a couple hours, I would say. There was a
2.5 hour one.
There was like a Northwestern series a few years ago. I feel like there was a pretty lengthy rain delay for. Maybe I'm misremembering the opponent, but I've sat through a few.
I feel like you have a pretty good sixth sense of giving me games when you're going to be gone.
I just have you cover all the Nebraska-Michigan games, which for some reason tend to,
the rain delay plus Michigan's willingness to just walk 47 batters in a game somehow survive it. Thanks, Nate Adcock. I'll never not be mad about that Friday night game. Just trash, straight trash. That's all I got. I'm out. I don't have any other weather stories to add.
Yeah, I'm done dealing too.
Bruntz, bring us home.
Well, if you want that and more, including Super Bowl recipes, old man takes, and recruiting coverage, and football team coverage, basketball coverage, baseball coverage, we're at the nexus of the sports universe where all seasons collide and come together. Do it at Husker247. We'll have plenty on the site. Lots of we're almost getting into the spring football preview portion of the calendar too. So that'll all be on the site. For Mike Schaefer and Brian Christopherson, I'm Michael Bruntz. We'll be back with you with another podcast later this week.